Sitting the ACA qualification, passing all 15 exams first time, and becoming a chartered accountant is easily the hardest thing I've done in my life to date. Now, despite achieving this, growing up, I would never really consider myself the most academic person. I wasn't great at maths, nor did I particularly enjoy it. I went to a pretty average state school and was probably not the person you think would go on to become a chartered accountant. But nevertheless, I did it and achieved scores as high as 98% in some of the exams. So I'm not saying this to try and brag, firstly, but I think the only way I really did this was figuring out how to study effectively and really how to maximize my time. So in this video, I'm going to give you a bit of advice on studying, particularly if you aren't the most academic person, and hopefully give you some insights to pass your own exams, whether you're sitting the ACA or the ACCA, or even any other qualification, to be honest, because I do think what I've done can be repeated by other people. Now, I really don't want to give you the generic advice that you've probably heard a million times from every accounting YouTuber or study YouTuber, like do past questions and read the textbooks, because no doubt you probably know all that by now. I'm going to give you some of the more nuanced advice that people probably don't talk about as much. With that, let's dive into the first point. And that's all about finding your power hours. No doubt there's certain times a day where you feel more productive. Whether you are a night owl and you are pretty switched on at 9 p.m. or midnight, or you're an early bird and you are more of a 5 a.m., 6 a.m. kind of person. I really would focus on identifying that as quickly as you can and really optimizing your study schedule to match that frequency. Because for me personally, I've always been an early bird. I can wake up pretty easily at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and smash out a couple of hours of studying before work. My brain is just wired that way and I'm very focused first thing in the morning. But if you speak to me past about 8 o'clock at night, I really can't focus very well. My brain is sort of all over the place and I really just want to switch off. So for me, when I got started with studying, I was very self-aware and knew when I could study best. And I really optimized my routine for that. So when I was sitting the ACA exams, it was very much get the studying done before work in the morning or early morning on the weekends. Going to work and doing my 9 to 5 and then getting back, maybe doing a little bit more, but nothing too intense and just trying to switch off a bit more. But I do know other people who before 8 a.m. they can't focus on anything. So it's definitely a lie-in for them and then straight to work. But then come 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, they can really switch on and focus. So I would firstly start by identifying which one resonates most with you and really focusing your routine on matching that style of work. My second tip is to practice past questions to time. Now, I know I said I wouldn't touch on the generic advice, but I really think practicing to time is very, very important because it's all good doing past questions and giving yourself all the time in the world to do them. But when you put a clock on that question and you give yourself that time pressure, it really makes you think differently and really prioritize what it is you actually need to get down. Let's say you're a early bird, you've figured out that 6 a.m. is your time to study and you've got 1 hour to study before work. So 6 to 7 a.m., then you need to get ready to go to the office. What I would do in that time is if I'm studying for an exam where each question you should spend around 50 minutes, I would literally switch on a timer for that 50 minutes and spend that whole 50 minutes sitting a question to time as I would in the actual exam. Rather than, let's say, giving yourself that full hour to sort of go through the question, not really pay too much attention to time and just see where you get to. I would see how long it takes you to get through a question and really put yourself under that time pressure. Because ultimately that's such a key part of the exams, being able to stick to the time and keeping your answers very precise and to the points rather than trying to waffle and take up a long time. I really do think that pressure is going to help you so much more and is really going to keep you in that mindset of sticking to time and keeping things to the point. My third tip is to practice in the exam software. For the ACA, there is a certain exam software that is used by the ICAW, which you can actually access if you go onto the website. Just use your login details, I believe it is, or if you just Google ACA practice software, it comes up. But it's very different to sitting a question and typing it down in a Word document, for example. I really think you should focus on doing questions in this software. And to be honest, it's something I didn't really start doing until a bit later on when I was sitting the exams. And it's very different from doing it in a Word document, for example. Because at least with the ICAW one, you have the question on one side, and then you have this Word text box at the top, and then this Excel in the bottom. And you need to be able to copy and paste from that Excel into the Word document and format your answer properly. So doing things in the software and making sure that you do copy and paste and you format, which does take a few minutes, incorporating that into your question practice and factoring that in is going to be the most realistic use of your time and give you the best chance of succeeding when it comes to the actual exam. And I'm sure if you're sitting the ACCA or CIMA, it's going to be something pretty similar. So as soon as you can, start practicing questions in the software and you will thank yourself later. My fourth tip is to learn key Excel formulas. There's a big emphasis on Excel and formulas in the ICAW exams, and I'm sure it's the same for the ACCA as well. But really, there's a few that you really need to know, and they're going to save you an awful lot of time in both the exams, but also you can translate into your job too. I really think those key ones are sum if, count if, and using pivot tables. At least that's what I remember doing most in the exams and also in my job, to be honest. So getting familiar with them, starting to incorporate them into the exams is going to save you a hell of a lot of time, but also something that's going to be very useful for work too. So it does translate quite well. It's really worth taking the time to practice using these formulas sooner rather than later, and being able to identify certain questions and areas where they can be used to save time and give yourself the best chance of getting all your content down in a question to secure that pass. My fifth and final tip is to develop a study plan and to actually plan out your days and weeks. I'm surprised quite a lot of people don't really do this, but when I was studying, every Sunday night, I would basically plan out my week to come. So I'd know when I'm going to be in the office, when I'm working from home or on a client site, and what that really means for my study time in those days. So if I'm working from home, let's say 2 days a week, and I know I can dedicate maybe 2.5 hours instead of the usual hour to studying on those mornings when I work from home, I would really tailor the questions I do to that day. So focusing more on the longer form questions, or even being able to do 2 questions in that time rather than just the one. And then on days where I'm in the office, I just have maybe an hour before work where I would just either do a question or a half question or even just mark something. But I'd know exactly what question I was going to mark or what question I was going to do, and sort of just have a list to work through when I was preparing for the exams. I really think it's more beneficial to do this than thinking every day what it is you're going to do and sort of wasting that time trying to figure out what questions to do or what to study. Being very intentional with your time and giving yourself certain questions to complete or topics to study is going to give you a greater sense of achievement when you do actually go on to complete that question or that topic. And it also gives yourself some sort of objective measures. So rather than just having a study block in the morning, if you know exactly what it is you're going to be doing, you can feel a sort of sense of achievement when you get it done, rather than sometimes not knowing exactly what it is you're doing and having an unrealistic expectation of what you can do can be quite demotivating. So I'd really try and plan out your weeks or your days whenever you can, and just tailor it around what it is you are preparing for and how close you are to that exam. So there we have it, 5 pretty quick fire tips to help you study for the ACA or ACCA. I hope you found it helpful. I'd appreciate a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.